Hi, this is Rabbi Chaim Kaufman. Welcome to our 87th installment in the Torah portion of the week. We're holding by Parshas Korach, and Parshas Korach is a famous story where Korach takes himself, 250 great people, and they come up against Moshe Rabbeinu and Aaron HaKohen, and they go up against them, and Korach is jealous and ends up dying through the ground opening up and destroying him and his followers. So it's a good part of the Parsha speaks about Korach. So I do want to speak about about this whole thing. Last year we spoke about the idea of jealousy and how Korach was jealous. If you look at the beginning of the Parsha, chapter 16, book of Numbers, verse 1, it says, Korach, the son of Yitzhar, son of Kahat, son of Levi, separated himself with Datan and Aviram, sons of Eliav, and On, son of Peles, offspring of Reuven. And they stood before Moshe with 250 men, children of Israel, leaders of the assembly, those summoned for meeting, men of renown. And they gathered together against Moshe and against Aaron, said to them, it's too much for you, for the entire assembly, all of them are holy, and Hashem is among them. Why do you exalt yourselves over the congregation of Hashem? And Moshe heard and fell on his face. So that is the book of Numbers, chapter 16, verses 1 to 4. So there's an interesting thing that goes on here, right? We know that Korach is jealous. That Korach comes out against Aaron and he says that he should have been the high priest. That Moshe Rabbeinu finds favoritism with his brother, and he was worthy. Keep in mind, he's one of the people that held the ark, and if you weren't on a high level, you wouldn't have been able to hold the ark. You would have died from the sheer holiness of it. So here we have to understand, like we mentioned, we spoke about this idea of jealousy and how he was jealous and totally destroyed him. So I want to speak about a little bit different aspect of what this idea, of Korach going against Moshe and Aaron. So we do understand that this is the greatest generation in the history of man, that Korach saw the miracles. Korach certainly wasn't a dummy, right? He held the Aaron, which was a tremendously prestigious position. All right, he was jealous. Right, he was jealous of Moshe and Aaron, and he felt that he got shafted. That Moshe gave the priesthood to Aaron, to his brother. He's showing protection, showing favoritism. Why shouldn't have he got that? He has lineage also, right? His lineage goes back to Kahat, right? Goes back to Yaakov. He's also got good lineage. So why shouldn't he have become the high priest? So when we break it down, and we look at this a little more in depth, says Ramosha Feinstein, Zecher Tzadik Livrocha, he was the greatest rabbi of the last generation in America, certainly according to everyone, nothing to talk about. And Drash Moshe, his book he wrote on the Chumash, commentary he wrote on the Chumash, he says like this. He says that Korach himself, as great as he was, he saw the miracles in Egypt, saw the miracles in the desert, saw God face to face, at Mount Sinai when God gave the Torah. All right, pretty incredulous. He thinks that Moshe Rabbeinu was acting on his own and that he's showing favoritism. But he says there's a fundamental point. And the fundamental point is really what I want to focus on today. And that fundamental point is that with all the miracles and everything that Korach saw, with everything that he saw, how could he have made such a mistake? How could he have thought that Moshe, and Aaron are acting on their own? And that they're not getting direct commands from God? Because you see many times in the Torah that Torah is by the Hashem el Moshe lemor, that God spoke to Moshe saying, or by the Hashem Moshe ve'Aaron lemor, or God spoke to Moshe and Aaron saying, say to the Jewish people like this and like this. Right? So it's pretty clear that Moshe is just writing down Moshe is giving over what God wants him to give over. Obviously, one of the commands in the Torah is you can't add or subtract to the Torah. So therefore, he himself, because God gives him his stamp of approval at Mount Sinai, he himself cannot go against anything in the Torah. Right? He can't add, can't subtract, can't do anything. But we have to ask ourselves, says Ramosha, says we have to ask ourselves, he lived, in this great generation. He came out of Egypt, was in the desert, saw God face to face on Mount Sinai, saw all these miracles. How could he have made a mistake? How is it possible for him to make a mistake? It says Ramosha Feinstein. Ramosha Feinstein said, you know how he made a mistake? Because he didn't internalize the message. He saw things with his own eyes, and even though he saw it with his own eyes, didn't make that strong of an impression. Now you take somebody like Yisro, Moshe's father-in-law, or Jethro, if you want to call him that. Yisro, Jethro, same person. So the Torah over there in the beginning of Parshas Yisro says, Vayishma Yisro. And Yisro heard. What did he hear? Rashi says he heard the war of Amalek. Jewish people fought against Amalek. And he heard about Kriyas Yamsuf. Jewish people coming out. And coming out of Egypt and going through the sea where the sea split. Now, what about the miracles? I mean, he must have heard about the miracles also. Right? It couldn't be just those two things. He heard it, didn't hear anything else. So, it could be that, everything else he heard, these two things made the most impression. Now, you have to keep in mind, who was Yisro? Yisro himself was the probably greatest priest that existed in that time. There wasn't an idol in Midian or anywhere else. That's where he lived, in Midian. There wasn't an idol that he didn't try, right? That he didn't worship. And then when he hears what happens to the Jewish people, he says, I want to join. I want to be part of the Jewish people. Now, Yisro heard these two things, right? He heard, or this is what made him change. He heard about the war of Amalek, what pretty incredulous, where the Jewish people on the greatest role of their life, and this nation tries to attack them. Even though the Jewish people had a tremendous high, right? That made an impression. And the second thing is splitting of the Red Sea or the Red Sea. That is what made an impression also. Now you have to keep in mind he wasn't there. So, as is brought down, we say Ein doi mishmiya l'riyah. There is no comparison to hearing something, than seeing it. Seeing is believing. So if you hear about something, okay, makes an impression, right? Might make it a big impression, but the question is, the person going to change their life because of what they heard. Just because the person hears something, you can still have a doubt. Well, maybe they exaggerated. Maybe it didn't happen exactly the way, they said it did. In any case, these two things made an impression on him, and he says, I want to be part of the Jewish people. So, what about the rest of the world? It says Yisro heard. Well, didn't the rest of the world hear also eventually? Right, okay, it wasn't tweeted out. Not everyone got the information, in a split second after it happened. Okay, so I understand that. But once they found out, once the other nations hear, don't they want to jump on the bandwagon? Aren't they interested? So, what do we know? We know that no one's interested. Right? They might have heard it, but didn't make an impression. For them, it didn't make an impression. They weren't there. They didn't see it. It wasn't entrenched in their bones, going through all the plagues in Egypt. So it didn't affect them the same way as it affected the Jewish people. So here you have somebody not Jewish at the time, and that made an impression, what he heard. Now again, the other nations could say, well, how do we know it's true? It's only a rumor, right? Maybe it didn't exactly happen the way they said it happened, right? There are a number of possibilities of what may have transpired to give them enough doubts to say, okay, very nice, but, I didn't see it. I wasn't a part of it. It doesn't affect me the same way. Yisro said not like that. Yisro said, wow, this is such an incredible thing. And, God's out there and he fights for the Jewish people and he takes them out of Egypt, fights against the Amalekites, against Amalek, and he splits the sea, gives them the Torah, right? Or that's going to be after, right? That's the whole question when Yisro came. Did it come before the giving of the Torah, after the giving of the Torah, right? But at the same time, it makes a very strong impression on him that makes him act. Now, the rest of the world, we don't hear anybody, any nations or any people come and say, wow, that's so great. I want to be part of the Jewish people. We don't see that, right? We don't hear anything like that. It seems that the only one in the world who made any change, wanted to be part of this was Israel, even though seemingly the whole rest of the world heard as well. Now, that being said, what happened? How can that be? So even now, we're going to make this comparison. It's probably not a fair comparison, right? But this should have affected Korach and everyone, part of the Jewish people, greater than it should have affected Yisro, because they were there. They saw what happened. And we can make it stronger. If it was so strong and experienced and so powerful what they went through, why is it that only 20% go out? Right? Why is it 80% die in the plague of darkness? That they're not worthy. They don't want to come out of Egypt for whatever reason. And they saw all the miracles. Right? So that's kind of hard to understand. Right? Well, we're not going to deal with that. But, I want to deal with this other idea. And that is that the fact that Yisro himself, even though he wasn't there, it made such a stronger effect upon him than it did with Korach. So comes along Moshe Feinstein. Moshe Feinstein says he saw the miracles, right? He saw the miracles in Egypt. He witnessed the miracles by the mountain, in the desert. He witnessed all these things. There is one problem, though. What he witnessed did not affect him. So that is extremely difficult to understand. Because if you see open miracles, and that's what he saw, how could he not be affected? How in the world can he be the same person? Not only that, but if we realize, and it actually happened, right? More than we realize, it actually happened, that God did an open miracle for us. And that's going to be pretty clear, it's an open miracle. So if God does an open miracle for us, for whatever, for whichever person, whoever it is, and after they witness his open miracle, they get saved in a superhuman way. Something happens, it's above nature, and they stay the same person. So God is going to be very upset. Why? So here, God went out of his way to help this person, to save them against all odds, and this person didn't even change. It didn't even move them. God says, what a waste. I did all this, and seemingly I wasted my time. So, next time around, God says, well, I put you through this. I saved you. You didn't do anything. You came back to me the same as you were before. Maybe you gave me thanks in a small way, right? But at the end of the day, you weren't moved. So God can say, what a waste of time. Next time around, there's probably not going to be so much divine protection. Because God already put you through this. God already helped you. And you didn't change. And you didn't move. So, even seeing the greatest miracles of all time, Korach did not internalize the message. The message seems to have gotten lost. So we would say, 2,000 years later, 2,500 years later, we would say, well, if that happened to us, of course we'd change on the spot. It would make us new people. So there's a story with Rav Noach Weinberg, Zecher Tzadik Livrocha. He started the Yeshiva Ish Torah. And Rav Noach tells a story that there was, he was giving a class, and there was someone in the class that said And Rabbi, you don't have to tell me about God. God and I are pretty tight. Let me tell you the following story. So this guy tells Rav Noach the following story. He's on his motorbike. There was oil, in the road or whatever it was. The bike skidded. He goes over a cliff and says, God, save me. Reaches out and there's a tree there. Right over the cliff, there has to be this tree. He grabs out and he grabs his branch. He starts screaming for help and people save him. So he says, Rabbi, you don't need to tell me. You don't need to tell me about God. See? Look what God did over here. Look how God saved me. So Rav Noach looked at him and said, yeah, that's true. But who do you think sent you off the cliff? So, it's an eye-opener. Why is it an eye-opener? Because he only looked at the end of the story. The end of what happened was God saves him. But at the end of the day, if God runs the world, which he does, and he's in control of everything, so he made this happen also. Why? Okay, it's a good question. Right? Why God does what he does, so, if I knew that, you wouldn't be watching my video right now. I'd be world famous. So what happened? God's given him a wake-up call. And that wake-up call means, he says, Joe, I want you to be better. I want you to strive higher. So you know what? I'm going to show you I can interfere. I'm going to show you I can even save your life. Now, if Joe says, you know what? This is a divine act. There's no question. Totally a divine act. I got to give thanks back. I got to give back to what God gave to me. He just gave me life. So it could be I'm not leading the life that I should be. So what does he do? He takes this on, as his project now from this day forward, saying God's going to be part of my life every day. I'm going to pray. I'm going to do what he wants me to do according to what the Torah says. Because he's given a tremendous wake-up call. Now, even if a person gets that wake-up call, right, it doesn't mean a person's necessarily going to act, or it could take them longer to act. There's a famous book, mentioned a number of times, different videos. There's a book called The View from Above. You can Google it. It's probably on Amazon.com. It's a book called The View from Above. It's about a secular Israeli that gets clocked on the head by a beam. That's very high up at a construction site. And what happens? Beam clocks her on the head. She has an out-of-body experience, and she tells the story of what what most people tell when they have an out-of-body experience, whether a Jew or non-Jew. Their soul hovers over the body, and the soul floats towards this great light. They see their life flash before their eyes, everything that the Zohar says, and then they come back. Right? At some point, they come back to the body, and they come back to life. So this woman had an unbelievable out-of-body experience, and it took her 7 years to come back to Torah. So you would think that someone has such an experience, is saved from such a tragedy, comes back to this world. Because if God didn't want her to come back to this world, she would have been dead. So for whatever reason, she had the merit to come back. It took her 7 years to actually come back to Torah. She had to rehabilitate other things, but it took her 7 years. Now, why is that? So God gives us free will. Everybody has free will. If God would do open miracles on a regular basis, take away our free will. But even if he does the miracle, which a person recognizes is an absolute miracle, why does God do it for them? Right? That we have to ask. Why? So God, by doing this, wants the person to wake up. Obviously, if he said their life isn't worth anything, so he would have taken it. If he would have saw there was no hope, he would have taken it. He's giving them another chance. He's giving them a tremendous opportunity to reconnect. Now, a person can take that and run with it or not, right? So since we do have free will, a person can go either way. They could justify what happened. It wasn't really a miracle. It could be explained away in different ways, etc. The evil inclination is very good at, when a person, hits, let's say, a high spiritual level, or they have, a sort of epiphany. So it comes on, the evil inclination tries to cool it down. Tries to convince you of all kinds of things, that what you just went through wasn't what you think you went through. So anyone who has some religious experience, and they feel that something's happening, you have to take advantage. And my Rebbe always says, if something like that happens, you get, a spark, you get that inspiration, you got to run with it because it doesn't last that long. So in this case, these cases are wake-up calls. God's knocking on the door. He wants you to change. Right? He wants you to attach to him, to do what he wants. And if you don't take advantage of that, then God says, well, I just wasted my time. Then the repercussions could be much more drastic. That we don't want to go through. So we can say that this is a similar thing that Korach went through. He just took it much further. And what Korach went through was he saw all the miracles. See, but the miracles didn't affect him. The miracles he didn't internalize. And that's how he can be jealous of Moshe and Aaron. Because his view of how we saw things was skewed. And therefore he drew the wrong conclusion. For the sole reason that, his mind took him elsewhere. His heart led him astray. So Moshe Feinstein adds another point over here. Moshe Feinstein says we have to look at the mitzvahs as Korach did not. Had Korach looked at the mitzvahs in the following way, Korach never would have sinned. Had Korach looked at the mitzvahs and said, the reason why we do anything in this world is because God commanded it. Right? It's a direct command from above. The fact that it's a direct command from above obligates me to do things. So therefore, there's no reason to question. That doesn't mean we shouldn't try and learn to the best of our ability why, what the purpose of the mitzvahs are and why we do them, and to do them at the highest level. But at the end of the day, we're not going to be lenient if we understand everything's a decree. Doesn't matter how well we understand it. Doesn't matter how much it makes sense to our own minds. At the end of the day, the bottom line is going to be, God said it, I do it, that's it. That is the mantra. So Moshe Feinstein says, Korach did not get that point. Korach missed it. Because his evil inclination took him away. Right? It caused him to be jealous. Caused him to have desire to something that didn't belong to him. And therefore he went to the ends of the earth to get what he thought rightfully belonged to him, and it cost him his life. And it cost the life of 250 great people as well. So, yeah, jealousy can take a person out of this world, literally. But at the same time, you have to understand, or try to the best of your ability to understand the message God is giving. And that message is, I want you to change. I want you to become better. I'm going to show you these miracles. What was the purpose of the miracles? To make the Jews strong in their belief in God. So when they're in the desert and all these things are happening, you got nations trying to attack them, and they're in the desert and there's no food, etc. God wants them to work on their emunah muscles. God wants them to flex them, their belief in Him. At the same time, God did all these things to build them up, to make them into a nation, to be able to accept the Torah from Him on Mount Sinai. Right? So that is, the main purpose that the Jews are in Egypt, because they have to learn how to serve a king in this world in order to know how to serve the King of Kings. Now that being said, they should have got the message. Right? They suffered tremendously. They should have internalized the message. So 20% did. They're the ones that got out. 80% missed it. Either they weren't worthy to come out, or they weren't interested in coming out, which boggles the mind. Imagine you're living in Auschwitz, You know, you're living in Auschwitz. Wow, I'm so happy living in Auschwitz. I don't want to go anywhere else. So you can say, really? That's what they thought? And the answer is, you know, they probably thought they weren't on the level to survive in the desert. That, you know, who knows, maybe they're, you know, the mitzvahs that they've done weren't enough to protect them. And that they're going to go into the desert and, you know, who knows what's going to be. God promised them, I'm going to take you into this land, I'm going to give you the Torah. Wasn't enough. They were still too afraid. That's the problem with the sin of the spies. We spoke about last week, same thing. Maybe they thought that their merit was up and that they couldn't take over the land. God can do anything. Look what he's done up until this point. Okay, go back and watch that video. Right? We spoke about that. The point here is the message did not get internalized. So whatever trials and tribulations that we go through, let's say, for argument's sake, let's say a person had money, person was well off, you know, and they felt that people were burdening them to help them financially, you know, they were having difficult times, this person had money, you know, they should have, you know, helped them a lot more. You know, the person sort of fled, you know, they didn't want to be hounded by people all the time. And what happened? Eventually, let's say that person lost his money. And then, years later, let's say 15 years later, recoups some of the money, right? Has a level of success. Doesn't recoup everything, but now he's on much stronger ground. So now when people come to them and they say, you know, can you help me? You know, I need money for this, for that. You know, if you're in the ability to help at that point and you don't, it's going to be much more severe. It's going to be much more severe because, okay, God took away. God gave it back to a certain extent. Maybe not to the extent that they had it before, okay. But God gave it back to them. And now, person's been on both sides. He's been on the one side where he doesn't have. He's been on the side where he does have. Right? But the side where he does have, he had it taken away. So now, God comes along and says, I'm going to give you a golden opportunity. I'm going to give you back. I'm going to put you back on your feet. Now let's see what you do. Let's see how it's possible. You know, are you going to be the same person? Did you learn from the lesson? Or did you not learn from the lesson? If you didn't learn from the lesson, then God's going to come down like a ton of bricks much harder. Because he said, okay, I gave you. You didn't do what I wanted, so I took it away. I gave it back, and you still didn't do what I wanted you to do. You didn't get the message. So the repercussions are that much more serious. So if someone had witnessed all the miracles in Egypt and come out, gotten to Mount Sinai, held the iron itself, walked with it when they traveled, God says, everything I gave you, and this is what you do? You know, you're jealous of Moshe and Aaron? So he gets severely punished. Right? The earth swallows them up. Talmud says that if you go to a certain place, you put your ear to the ground, you can hear every 30 days that Korach and his followers say, Moshe emes v'Torah so emes, v'nachnu b'doi. Moshe is true, the Torah is true, and we are false. Yeah, he got the message. It was too late. The decree was already made. But he did not internalize. That boggles the mind. It just his desires and jealousy totally overcame him to the point where he wasn't able to see things the way he needed to. And that's because he didn't internalize the message. So now, this is a pretty hard thing. Even if God does miracles, even if we witness things above nature, and things go our way in different ways, but we don't take it to heart. We forget about it. A few days later, a week later, we go from this high up here and we go down. And it doesn't make an impression. something you have to fight for. It's something that's not easy to stay with. That's why my Rebbe says if a person has this type of experience, you have to run with it. Right? You totally have to run with it. And try and make it last as much as possible. Because if you don't, it goes by. And maybe you're not going to learn the lesson. And if you don't learn the lesson that God is teaching you, God says, why did I do it? What was the purpose? I wasted my time. We don't want to hear that. We don't want to go through more difficult things. We want to get the message, and we want to internalize it, and we want to become better people because of it. Because at the end of the day, everything that goes on in our lives, in one way or another, are caused either by what we do or by what situations God puts us through, which both are true. Right? We do things to ourselves, there are repercussions, and God puts us in certain situations, and there are repercussions also. But why do we look for leniencies in other things? In this world, why are we not living the Torah the way it needs to be? Why are we not getting it? The simple answer is because this is a hard world to live in. Ultimately we're lazy. We don't want to strive. We don't want to work hard. Probably why most marriages today in the secular world end up in divorce, because it's too hard to work on. Could be you have a small percentage will want to work on it, right? But at the end of the day, it's hard, right? Anything worthwhile is certainly hard. So working on belief in God is hard because we see a lot of craziness in the world. We don't fathom why God is doing what He's doing, right? And we do understand, spoken many times, God runs the world. So that's the question. When bad things happen to good people, if God is all good, then why do these bad things happen? So the answer is we don't know. Some of it could be payback for what we did in a previous life, what we call reincarnation. Come back as a reincarnated soul. Some of it certainly could be what we do in this world. There's payback for what we do also. We make mistakes and how, what the repercussions are. So, but at the end of the day, we don't know. We don't know what corresponds to what. Right? But what happens in our own lives, as brought down many times, is that God acts with us measure for measure. If we don't do certain things, or we do them in a bad way, they're going to come back to haunt us. Right? They're definitely going to come back to bite us. So, with that being said, we have to get the message. Sometimes God will send a message, and it won't be direct. Something will happen nearby. Maybe in the same continent. Maybe in the same country. Not necessarily in the same town or city or state that a person lives in. But the wake-up call. If that doesn't wake a person up, God has to be more direct. Then eventually He'll hit the person himself. Whether, with sickness, whether livelihood issues, could be any number of things. But the point is, these things are there to get us to change. Well, if we were in tune with ourselves, would God need to do this? The answer is no. If we serve God properly, we wouldn't need it. We don't grow without trials and tribulations. That's very true. But we could be on a higher level. If we're on a much higher level, we don't need them. We can serve God the way it needs to be done. But obviously we're not holding there. Obviously we have a long way to go. So even in our own lives, we have to take stock of what we do. We have to take stock of what's around us. We have to try and understand the best of our ability in what we see and get the message. Because everything, essentially, we're going to do is a decree. Some will understand more, some will understand less. Bottom line, God said it, we do it. And Korach missed that point. He might have understood it, but he didn't take it from here, didn't take it from his mind, and he didn't put it in his heart. You can intellectually understand something, you don't put it in your heart, it's just in your mind. So therefore, Korach failed because he didn't get the message. He didn't get what he should have gotten by what he saw. And these great miracles in God's divine providence gave it lip service. If that's true and Korach failed, then you're going to say, well, how's that going to help us? If Korach was so great and he failed and he took 250 great people with him, then there is no chance for us. So I might as well just throw in the towel. And some people will say that. Can't remember everything. It's too hard. It's inconvenient. It's all this and all that. So I'll take my chances. Whatever happens, happens. Obviously, it's not a Jewish outlook. We have to strive to be the best we can. We have to work hard regardless of what God throws at us or not. But you see, we have to be able to be vessels to be able to internalize the message. We have to be in tune in God's world with what God wants from us through the teachings of the Torah in order to be able to do that. Now, God says that's not an impossibility. People have failed along the way. That's true. Well, it doesn't matter. We still have to live our lives the best way we can. We have to strive to be the best that we can. And therefore, it doesn't matter what's around us. It doesn't matter what we see. Because even if we see great things, that's just going to make us more liable. That's going to give us more responsibility. And woe to the person that's given a great amount of responsibility and blows it. In other words, they're given the message. They go through something in order to perfect something. And God seemingly wastes the message. Because the person doesn't get it. So the person not getting it is tragic. It's tragic because he didn't get it in general. And it's tragic because the repercussions now are going to be that much greater. You go to next week's Parsha, speaks about Bilam, the great non-Jewish prophet. One thing we see from Bilam, spoke about last year, is the fact that Bilam himself had prophecy. Some say it was even greater than Moshe himself. But if Bilam had this great prophecy and God came to him, then how come he was so immoral? How come he was so corrupt? So mentioned over there, the reason is because prophecy does not make you righteous. Prophecy does not make you a tzaddik. I would think it should. I would think that if someone has a direct connection to God, God speaks to them, and God says, I want you to do this, that, and the other. The other thing, it means they have a connection. More than most people, probably more than the majority people of that generation. So that being said, how could you still be corrupt? How could you still be immoral? Because you have free will. But we're talking prophecy. Prophecy is a whole different thing. God rests his presence upon someone, and that's what he does. Now, that's bad. That's certainly bad. So, being a prophet is a real serious thing. And it's no guarantee. I mean, this is mind-boggling. It is no guarantee he's going to be righteous. That he's going to be a tzaddik. See, but we can't get that depressed. We know we live in a very low generation. We're not holding by this. At the same time, it doesn't matter. Because we have to strive to be who we need to become. Regardless of what level we're on, regardless how difficult it is, etc. God runs the world and he knows what he's doing. And he puts everyone in their own unique situations. But these situations are not there to break people. These situations are giving them strength in things that they never thought they could do. My own personal life, having all my money stolen and other things that went on. So, yeah, you can be very bitter, you can be very angry, but also gives me the power, so to speak, to help others go through a difficult situation because I went through it myself. I'm not saying I always succeeded going through it. But if someone's gone through a difficult thing, And they've overcome to a certain extent, that's a tremendous thing. Because if I had not gone through that, yeah, I could potentially help people that have, but it's not the same. Right? I can empathize, but going through it, it's a totally different ballgame. It's more real, so to speak. So, and also what happened, in the aftermath, years later, it formed the person that I became, because of this one thing, in many ways. I changed my whole outlook, on things. Certainly I think for the better, not for the worse. But, a person gets hit like that, he gets smacked upside the head, very easy to go crawl in the hole, right? Stick your head in the sand like an ostrich would, right? If someone said, well, do you have any regret? Do you have any regret, money you helped others with or whatever? And I said, no. I have absolutely zero regret. This was meant to be. Obviously, there's a higher purpose in all of this. And I got thrown around the world, and other things, not so pleasant, but I grew tremendously from it. I mean, it had other effects, negative effects. But at the end of the day, the message was there. Question is, okay, do you blaspheme God? Do you say, God, what are you doing? Do you question why God does what he does? Or do you say, you know what? It's a result of what I've done. Or if it's not a result of what I've done, it's a result of my, my reincarnated soul, whatever it had to go through. It's probably a result of what I've done also. Probably a little bit of both. But at the end of the day, God knows what's best for you. We may not understand. But see, something happens that's pretty drastic. God's knocking on the door. So you say, well, how do I know what to change? How do I know what to work on? Yeah, so work on everything. But I can't work on everything. Okay, take little things to work on. Try and become better in general. Speak less about other people. Don't get so uptight, when one of your kids does something or someone does something. Don't overreact. Right? Take little things that a person can do. And that a person can handle. Because the situation changes. And it certainly did. So then the question is, okay, now I'm back on solid ground. If that's the case, did I get the message? Did the message come out? So now I can certainly understand better people who are in dire straits. Because I was there. So I can now just more than empathize. I can see where they're coming from and what they're going through. They don't even have to tell that much. I can, I'd be able to see it. Now, before that would have happened, I wouldn't have been able to see it. I wouldn't have been able to understand such a thing. So in that sense, I gained. I gained tremendously. I'm not saying, I love going through it. I'm not saying that, oh, I'm so happy it happened. I mean, I am at a certain extent because it could have been a lot worse. It was just with money, it wasn't sickness or anything else. Could have been a lot worse. So I got to be thankful for that. But you got to get the message. You got to see God's knocking at the door. And if he's knocking at the door, you better damn well get the message. Because if you don't get the message, God's going to knock again. But now multiply it by infinity. And if he knocks again and you didn't get the message the first time, there's going to be hell to pay. It'll come out in a way that you couldn't even imagine. You can say, wow, could it really be worse? So I'm always fond of saying, yeah, if God wanted to, he can make your life a lot worse. Well, it's already pretty bad. You fill in the blank, whatever the badness is. You think God can make it worse? He can make it worse. I'm not advocating that. But we have to appreciate what we have. We have to realize God gives us what we need, even if He doesn't give us enough. He's giving what we need for what we need to do. And then in hindsight, maybe God will throw you a bone and you'll understand why. Right? Things could have been planted 20 years ago. 25 years ago. Or more. And then it manifests itself whenever God wants it to. God's, okay, I'm ready now. This is what I'm going to do. But everything's already been put in motion. And now that's it. Now it's going to go. Why, what, where, when, how? These are good questions. But if you see how it happens, and you see something's above nature, that means there's something else going on. So that means, that's a scary thing. And that means that it's a huge wake-up call. And you better get the message. Because if you don't get the message, God's going to come down on you like a ton of bricks. And this is what happened to Korach. Korach, he didn't get the message. He lost it somehow. And his desires killed him. But he also took a lot of people with him, a lot of great people with him. He's very charismatic. He's very, very much able to convince others. Be that as it may, he got sucked in. Moshe, David, he prayed, he should do tshuva. If he doesn't do tshuva, God's going to judge. And that's what he did. So, Korach's on a much greater level than all of us. Korach saw a lot greater things than we've seen. Meaning, God's intervened in history. God has done outright miracles. So we haven't seen outright miracles. At least that we can say God did it. Right? There's some things maybe. But most things can't pinpoint and say, this is God's act here. So even though you'll say Korach was much greater, look at all the miracles he saw, and he failed, and he took all these people down. We're on a much lower level. Is there any hope? Yeah, there's hope. We have free will. We have the ability to do what God wants or not. Right? But when we see things, and things affect us in whatever way, whether it's with livelihood, with the spouse, with children, health, any of these things, God's knocking at the door. And when God knocks at the door, we better be ready to be able to withstand the challenge. Because if we don't withstand the challenge, God's going to take us down, God forbid, like he did Korach. So I want to mention that I made a course called Discover Your Biblical Path. There are 6 modules that anyone coming out of idolatry, if they want to understand what it means to be a Jew or be a Noahide, right? So I go through what it means to be a Jew, oral tradition, what it means to be a Noahide, how to find a community, how to find a rabbi, different problems a person will go through. And there's also 7 interviews for people who went through conversion and finished, or didn't go through conversion and stayed a Noahide. So you can find that on my Facebook fan page, Beyond Orthodox Conversion to Judaism, or Beyond Noahides, or my blog, orthodoxconversion.com. I give classes to people interested in conversion and being a Noahide. I also give a class, Intro to Kabbalah, which we're speaking about the Shema and its blessings based on the book Derech Hashem. That's every Tuesday night, 9 o'clock Eastern Time. Also, I have 2 question and answer sessions during the week. One is Tuesday at 10 in the morning, New York time. Thursday, 5 in the afternoon. 2 in the afternoon, New York time. And I also do a controversial video. It's called Controversial Issues on Tanakh Talk, T-E-N-A-K-T-A-L-K. That's tonight, Wednesday, 8 o'clock. 8 o'clock Central Time. You see that live either on TanakhTalk.com or on YouTube. And anyone who wants to contact me can send me an email, rabbichaimkaufman@gmail.com, RABBICHAIMCOFFMAN @gmail.com. Wishing everyone a great Shabbos.